Hi, and welcome back to my Dallas Cowboys blog. We're about a month away from the draft, so Dallas is unlikely to make many more signings and certainly none that are important before the draft. I'm not even sure who all is on the roster, so I decided to estimate my own depth chart, especially regarding the defense. There's a few players listed number 2 here on this depth chart for the front 7 that I've worked out that might end up starting somewhere else along the defensive line. So I went through their roster as it stands right now, and I figured out the depth chart. Help me prepare for the draft a little bit, but also figure out what it is that we have going on currently. We have several players that are only number 2 in their positions that might actually end up being starters. So there is some decent competition going on at places. Some players I'm looking forward to that are currently listed in the second as second team players include Ben Bass, who is coming on strong at Strongside Defensive End, and Ceaser Rayford, who looked good at outside linebacker for the Colts, but who hasn't been able to put it together in Dallas. Among linebackers, Davonte Holloman is listed as a number 2, but he may start somewhere even before training camp. Who do we even have in the front 7? So here's my depth chart of front 7 players pre-draft, post-free agency. Weak side defensive end, I have George Selvey starting. He's 270 pounds. Just keep that in mind. Weak side defensive end, George Selvey. My current starter, 270 pounds. We signed Jeremy Mincey. He is 265 pounds. I estimate he'll play weak side defensive end. It's a rotational player. At the 3 technique inside, we have Henry Melton, the star free agent that we signed. Whether you want to call him a star or not, he's coming back from injury. If you can put it back together, potentially we have a Pro Bowl defensive tackle. That's great. I currently list Ben Bass as the second string 3 technique. I don't know where he'll end up. He might end up starting at Strongside Defensive End, but right now I do project him as a defensive tackle. I currently list at the 1 technique our new signee Terrell McClain, and then last year's backup last year's starter Nick Hayden is now the backup for the 1. On the strong side defensive end, I currently project Tyrone Crawford. He's 284 pounds on the strong side, and then Ceaser Rayford I currently list as his backup. At middle linebacker, we have Sean Lee, Davonte Holloman, Ori Lemon. Weak side linebacker, I have Bruce Carter and then Martez Wilson. And at strong side linebacker, I have Kyle Wilbur, Justin Durant, and Cameron Lawrence. And then we have some guys that I don't know if they're going to be able to stick around, named Quentin Spears, Jonathan Stewart, and Jabro Williams. They're all listed at linebacker. So here's my question. I was looking over the weights. Are they going to get any player that weighs 330 pounds? They don't have a defensive tackle or a defensive player at all that is in that weight class. And that makes me like players like Ellis out of Louisiana Tech, who's a 330-pound sort of 1 tech, but he also has some speed. There's not a lot of guys that are 330 pounds that can actually move. So I do look for those guys in the draft. But it doesn't seem like Dallas has any interest in getting players like that. Even going back to when they had a 3-4 defense, where you traditionally have a 1 tech or a 0 tech that weighs in the 340-pound range, Dallas still ran with Jay Ratliff, who probably wasn't even 300 pounds. And it doesn't seem like they have any interest in drafting 330-pound players, even now in 2014. We'll see if that happens. There are a few 1 techs that I actually like late in the draft that are 330 pounds, but it's been a long time since Dallas had a player in that weight class on the defensive roster. So despite the lack of size at defensive tackle, Dallas is still losing DeMarcus Ware, who traditionally played at 255 pounds, but was reported to bulk up to 262 pounds last year. And ostensibly, Selvey takes his spot. Selvey carries 15 pounds more than Ware pretty naturally, weighing 270 pounds versus Ware's 255-pound weight for most of his career. You add to that defensive end Anthony Spencer was listed last year at 250 pounds, though I also believe that he was closer to 263 pounds. Either way, I'm currently projecting Tyrone Crawford or Ben Bass to take his spot. Crawford weighs 284 pounds and Bass weighs 295 pounds. Keeping with his size theme, notice that Sean Lee and Justin Durant are among the smallest linebackers on the roster. It's hard to believe that Davonte Holloman came into the league weighing 242 pounds and listed at safety. That's a big safety. So they're getting bigger. It seems like their draft picks are getting bigger at linebacker, and they're getting bigger at defensive end. They're not getting bigger at defensive tackle. That's the one spot where they're actually not getting bigger. When they were running a 3-4 defense, they would draft 6'5" players like Chris Canty because they could play 5-tech effectively. But to play inside in the NFL, a lot of times you don't want to be too tall. Jason Hatcher was notched for actually being too tall. A little more on that later. So no matter how you cut it, Dallas is getting a lot bigger at defensive end. 30 pounds, 40 pounds Tyrone Crawford, Ben Bass. Another 15 pounds over DeMarcus Ware. So last thought, I think Henry Melton projects as a more complete 3-tech than Jason Hatcher. Where I like Melton better is on first and second down. Melton will keep our linebackers cleaner over the course of the season. Since we have 6 7th-round picks, I put together a mini board of possible late-round picks. These are guys that are unlikely to be drafted until the end of the draft, and we have a big net to go out and get what would otherwise be well-regarded priority post-draft free agents. So here I rank 8 players that I would like that are probably accessible in the 7th round. These are guys that I would like in the 7th round. They're probably likely to be drafted in the 7th round. So someone has to take them. So some of these guys might actually go early in the 7th round, and so I put them as a higher priority. So I actually ranked these guys. These are my favorite 7th round picks, 1 through 8. I gave us 8, so we have some menus, some options. So my first 7th rounder that I want to take is fullback J.C. Copeland from LSU. Copeland is a long-armed fullback with a quick gait and power in his blocks. I'm often wrong on who Dallas drafts at fullback, but I'm really pulling for this guy. He's a load, and his arm length will give him some terrific matchup advantages. He'll be able to contribute right away in the designated role, so I have him number 1 in the 7th round, because he'll be able to step into our offense and contribute as a fullback immediately. So my number 2 7th rounder is guard Spencer Long from Nebraska. He was seen as a top 100 player, but is recovering from an ACL tear. He's recovered this year, but apparently his draft stock has not. I think he'd be ready to start by year 2, like Ron Leary did. Spencer Long could compete to start right away, like Leary did. Leary ultimately was practice squatted, but Long may prove more capable in his first year. I think Long will definitely compete to start in year 2 and could compete in year 1. So they have as the number 2 7th rounder. So I have him as the number 2 7th rounder because I think he can contribute. He could possibly contribute in year 1 at a premium position, premium in Dallas because we need big offensive linemen. And I think he can definitely compete in year 2. So, I mean, these are 7th rounders. You're looking for people that you could develop eventually, and I think he can. I think his knee injury held him back, and he could be a really good guard. Some people talked about him being a top 100 pick, but that was before the knee injury. So my number 3 guy, the number 3 7th rounder that I want is wide receiver Matt Hazel. He's from Coastal Carolina. Matt Hazel is a small school wide receiver with NFL-type measurables to go with top production at a small school. I see him as a good prospective Y player, the guy opposite Dez Bryant. He'll run routes all over the field vacated by Dez. If it all worked out for him, he could be a starter in his second year and help as a slot receiver in his first year. I believe Terrence Williams is a dynamite number 3 wide receiver, and that a season or 2, Matt Hazel could become the regular outside wide receiver, and Williams would be in the slot. Williams is a matchup push on the outside, but a matchup buster on the inside. So I'm looking at Matt Hazel to become my eventual number 2 wide receiver, and to take Terrence Williams and make him a dominant slot receiver. So my number 4 7th rounder is cornerback Marquestion Huff of Wyoming. He's also played safety. He'll stick in the NFL as a cornerback. His experience at safety helps the roster's flexibility. He should be able to help on special teams right away, and he has the athletic skills to challenge as a starter in the NFL. Has some physicality and demonstrated it while playing safety. He has a slew of skills to challenge starters all across the defensive backfield. Though realistically, it's his special team assets that will have him stick in years 1 and probably 2. He's not a safety, and he's not going to supplant our top 3 cornerbacks, so he's a lower priority, and that makes him the number 4 7th rounder on my board. Our number 5 7th rounder is running back Lorenzo Taliaferro from Coastal Carolina. They were a small school offensive juggernaut this year. You can tell because I have two of their players in my seventh rounder list. He ran a 4.58 40 and weighs 230 pounds. He's a highly productive back at a small school environment. I am really looking for a 230-pound back in this draft to go with Lance Dunbar and DeMarco Murray. Carlos Hyde and Jeremy Hill are the most celebrated 230-pound running backs in this draft, but Lorenzo is a good option in the 7th. Lorenzo isn't the goal line back or even the short yardage back per se. I don't believe size really makes a difference. Priest Holmes was an amazing short yardage back and was rather small. What I like about Lorenzo is he presents a completely different back for a defense to prepare for versus Murray and Dunbar. The more options that a defense will have to adjust for, the better. Where Dunbar has awesome speed, Lorenzo has great size. Murray is in between the two, with assets of both. Whatever 230-pound running back Dallas gets, I hope they remember the days of Marion Barber closing out fourth quarters. I think Jason Garrett was even here in 2007 for many of those games. My number 6 7th rounder is outside linebacker Tyler Starr. He played at South Dakota. He ran a 4.2 short shuttle and a 6.63 cone drill, and that suggests he can play all the linebacker spots, despite his poor 40 time. He ran a 4.9. At 6'4" and 250 pounds, he's got size. Some scout sites say he needs an NFL training regimen to catch up in core strength, but he lifts well. He can block well enough. If he can block well enough to warrant a role on special teams, I think he could develop into an ace strongside linebacker, covering the tight end and beating tight end blocks. His slow 40 doesn't lend itself to punt coverage. Despite that, he appears like he would be very good in zone coverage because of his change of direction skills, and his 10-yard split is pretty good at 1.68. At 6'4", Dallas may grow him into a defensive end in time, but I believe right now he's a good backup strong side linebacker who can start in the next couple of years. He'll need to stick on special teams the first year or more. To me, he looks like a defensive end who needs 20 pounds, but he's entering the NFL as a strong side backer, and he has the assets to succeed. Number 7, 7th rounder, is defensive end Ethan Westbrooks of West Texas A&M, a raw prospect with a question mentality. I think Rod Marinelli keeps it simple and keeps his players motivated. Some proffer that he has an intriguing pass rush potential, but I don't really see it. He probably didn't get the ideal combine scouting, or Ethan Westbrook probably didn't get the ideal combine coaching, so perhaps I should cut him some slack. But his power numbers were playing, and his short shuttle was playing, so nothing would really suggest he would ever do anything special as an outside edge rusher. He would not be dynamic as a starter anticipate. Ideally, he'd spell your starter on rundowns. But there is a role for a guy that I think could actually, this year, maybe deliver 200 snaps, spelling your guys on first and second down. I think Ethan Westbrooks could do that for the Dallas Cowboys. He could play about 200 snaps, and they would be moderately productive. And so for that reason, he makes my draft board in the 7th round as my number 7 7th rounder. My number 8 7th rounder is offensive tackle Matt Patchan of Boston College. He's a long-legged tackle with short arms, and I project him best at guard. He has a lot of strength and could develop into being like Kevin Grogan if it all works out for him. I think he's a year behind Spencer Long at the guard position. In fact, Matt Patchan hasn't played guard at all. He's been a tackle, and he played left tackle, and he acquitted himself well in college. But more on that in a bit. He's shifting positions from tackle to guard as I project. He could probably give up sacks as the third tackle just as easily as most third tackles in the NFL. Some people think he actually could play tackle in the NFL, but he need to elevate his technique to Joe Thomas-like levels. Joe Thomas is one of the best left tackles, and he's overcoming having short arms, at least short arms by left tackle standards. Tyron Smith, if you look at him, he has ridiculously long arms. And in fact, that's one of the defining traits of a lot of the great left tackles is the really long arm length. Yet there is a great player in our day and age who doesn't have long arms, Joe Thomas. So it is possible for you to overcome that as a left tackle. But Joe Thomas still came into the NFL as a highly regarded draft pick, and Matt Patchan is not. Now, Matt last season was injured, And so he came back from injury, and maybe if he hadn't been injured, his technique would be more advanced at this point. But it does seem like he'll need some improvement on his technique in order to compensate for the few shortcomings that he has. He still has a lot of power, and I think he's a great drive blocker in the making. That's why I compare him to Kevin Grogan. Kevin Grogan was kind of unusually tall as a guard, and he had long legs, and he didn't have terribly long arms. It's okay a lot of times for guards to have short arms, as long it's because the short arms in the guard position, they get inside, they don't have so much room to maneuver, and they got to fire their arms off quickly. So it can be an asset, but at the same time, you also can't be too tall, and so you wonder if a 6'6" guy is too tall to play guard with moderately short arms. But as long as he can get inside, get leverage on guys, get underneath them, even though he's tall, with his long legs, he could fire into people with a great deal of power, drive block, and be a strong right tackle. So I would draft Matt Patchan from Boston College to play my right tackle. I might have to have him be a backup for a year because I would need to coach him. It might even be 2 or 3 years because he has to learn new techniques. He's learning a new position. He was injured his junior year, so it's possible that set his technique back. Maybe he can make a great leap forward with pro coaching. He has good speed and would work well in our zone scheme. So he can move laterally. He could lead block. He could pull. But he can also drive block. So I like Matt Patchan. I think he's a developmental pick, but I actually can't see him as a starter and contributing on a winning team. So that's why I have him on my draft board. And so that's the last of my blog. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you later.